Well, my experience of God at an early age was through going to church, going to a pretty dry and dusty Anglican church, Church of England church in a village. And my experience of religion really was not great. I went to school, boarding school, where you had to go to chapel every morning, which was pretty boring, if I'm honest. It was not great. It was not a great experience. And so my whole understanding of who God was and what Christianity was dull, boring, and I thought that Christians at that time, through my teenage years, were dropouts, really. And they weren't sporty, and they weren't fun like I thought I was. Anyway, then I met some Christians during that time. Probably I had 2 or 3, I remember 3 specific occasions between the ages of about 13 and about 21, 22, where people who were Christians spoke to me about their faith and about this God. And it didn't really, I was sort of vaguely interested, but I just wanted to be nice to them really, but I was, it didn't really make much impact upon me. But at the age of about 21, I met this person sitting next to me. And what happened was I noticed something in Angela, who is now my wife. I noticed a difference, something about her that was different. There was an integrity, there was an honesty, there was something. There was a life that I saw in her. She didn't actually say anything to me about God or about what being a Christian was. There was just something about her life that I thought, there's something that's different. Anyway, I got to know Angela a bit more, and she didn't really talk to me about her own faith very much, but she gave me a book, and it was just a book that talked about who God was and what Christianity is. And I read this book, and as I read the book, it was like all the pieces of the puzzle that I had picked up in my life, really going to church, going to chapel at school, talking to these 2 or 3 different Christians that I'd met. I had bits of these puzzles, but none of them fitted together, and they just didn't seem to make any sort of a picture at all. Suddenly, as I read this book, it was like the bits of a puzzle coming together before my eyes and making a picture that I could understand and I could see, and I could believe in, put my faith and my trust in. So that was what happened. But the really remarkable thing was how God at that time intervened in my life. How God, it wasn't so much me choosing to believe in God, it was how God was literally opening my eyes and helping me to see something and believe in something that before had just been dull and boring to me. At that time I'd come to know Angela quite well, and this is the age of about 22.
What, you're not going to say that you were in love with me? Just my friend?
Madly.
Madly,
in
yeah.
love
Madly,
with
deeply.
the person who was sitting on my right.
Absolutely.
At that time. Now, I was 22, we've got that clear, okay. I was 22 and Angela, well 21, 22, that sort of age, and I just finished my university degree, and Angela was midway through her degree. And part of her degree was to go to California for a year, which doesn't sound like a degree at all, actually. Anyway, no, it was part of the course was to spend a year in California. So at that time, I'd been reading this book, and Angela was at that time in California, and I wasn't a Christian. I just read this book, and things started to become clearer to me. But I hadn't actually said, okay, I want to follow you. Jesus Christ, I want to follow you for the rest of my life. I hadn't got that far. I was still pretty nervous about doing that. I didn't really know what that meant fully. And so I was sort of wavering, if you like, in terms of whether or not this is something that I want to commit my life to. And Angela, what were you doing at that time?
I was doing lots of surfing, and I wasn't doing anything educational at all, was I? No. Actually, I was working really, really hard in California. But no, actually, the main thing that happened in California, which was so great for me, was getting involved with a Christian group on campus there, which was a really, really exciting thing for me. And these young people knew God in a way that I hadn't really up to that point in my life. And we started praying together as a group. I remember it was 6 o'clock in the morning that we always used to get together, which for students is pretty unheard of, but there was a group of about 10 or 20 of us, that in between that kind of number, who used to get together every morning to pray for friends and different people in the university who we were connected to, who we wanted to become Christians and who were on our hearts. And I added Ben into this list and said, can we please pray for Ben? He's in England and he is considering Christianity and he's thinking about it and he's understanding quite a lot now, but he just needs to make that leap of faith. And obviously God has to enable that to happen. We can't do that for him, but we can pray. So really, about 6 weeks, I suppose. It wasn't an awful long time, 6 or 7 weeks maybe into me being there, with a lot of prayer and personal prayer from me and also from this group. I got to this point where I heard God speak to me like an audible voice one night just as I was drifting off to sleep. I'd been reading a book about prayer, actually it was just about prayer, but one of the chapters in that was about fasting, and I remember thinking, well, that's weird because that only really ever happened back in ancient biblical times and that doesn't happen now, right? But hey, that's interesting. But that night as I was drifting off to sleep, I heard this voice and it was so clear, and it said, if you fast for Ben, he will become a Christian. And I was just blown away. I thought, how on earth am I going to do that? That's just horrible. How do you survive without food for even an hour? And but I did. I knew it was God. I knew it was something so serious. So I did take it seriously, and I got up the next day and I spent that day fasting, which was, as I've said, the most extraordinary experience for me. But halfway, I'd only been up maybe for about 2 or 3 hours, and I did have this very strong compulsion to phone Ben in England. It was very early in the morning for you, I think, but it was before he went off to college, and I didn't really know what I was going to ring him about, but I thought, okay, I need to ring him. So I rang him and I said, really, he's like, why are you calling me at this time? And I thought, well, I'm just wondering, how you're feeling about God and where you're up to with everything, and you do need to just make this decision. You can't have everything worked out in your head. It's gonna have to be something that you just jump into in the end. And he was kind of like, okay, well, thanks, that's a bit odd, but okay, have a good day kind of thing. And I was quite disappointed. Because I thought whenever I rang up that he was gonna have made the commitment and I wouldn't have to fast anymore, so I was like a bit gutted. So anyway, I left the apartment having phoned him, and then I spent the rest of the day.
Okay, anyway, so I had that phone call from Angela, and I was at that point where God had begun to reveal the truth to me, and I'd begun to see that God was real. But then I realised, actually, there has to be more than that. That I've got to do more than just believe that God is real. I've actually got to make a step of faith towards God, to say, okay, Lord, this is real. I want to follow you for the rest of my life. I had to come to a place in my own life where I was ready to move towards God. He had moved all the way towards me and opened my eyes, and this jigsaw come together. But I had to commit myself to follow him and to follow Jesus Christ for the rest of my life. And I was just putting it off because I just thought, oh, well, I'm just not sure. I'm like 90% sure, 95% sure, but I just want to wait till I'm 100% sure. But the thing is, with a step of faith, you're never 100% sure. There's a step of faith that we make rather than something that you can prove. So God used that phone call, having, spoken to Angela and then phoned me, and it made me realise, hang on, I could be in this place the rest of my life, believing in God, but not committing my life to follow him. And that's what I did. I just put the phone down and I just went into a room by myself and just said, okay, Lord, I want to follow you, and I know I can't do this on my own. I know you're the only way that I can have life in the future, that can have an eternal life, where all the rubbish things I've done are dealt with, and I just know you, your love and your peace and your joy for the rest of my life. And forever. And then that was it. It was done. Just like, and it was not a big thing. It wasn't a great big da-da in the skill. Just a simple thing, me and God. But for me, it was the step I made, and God took me at my word, and it was amazing. I didn't stop smiling for 2 weeks. People would mismeet me and say, "Why are you smiling? What's so funny?" I said, "Am I smiling?" I didn't. Anyway, that's another story. But then I tried to ring Angela back to tell her the good news in California, but she'd gone. She'd left her apartment to start her day. So of course, during all this time, she didn't know I'd actually committed my life to Christ. At that stage, she was still fasting. I didn't get hold of her then until the full evening, which must have been in your time.
No, I think it was the end of my day. I mean, I remember I only had to fast for 1 day,
Right.
so whatever the timings of it was. But
So I finally caught up with her when she was back at her apartment at the end of the day, so she'd been fasting pretty much for the whole day for the first time in her life. And it was just wonderful how God spoke to someone 10,000 miles away, whatever it was, 8,000 miles away, and how God just knows no boundaries. And just because He cares so much, He wanted me to realise that I had to move and step out in faith to trust Him.